and welcome back to Saved by Old Times. This is a musical discussion podcast where we are taking an unauthorized and very unofficial look into the discography of the band Deerhunter. On today's episode, we'll be looking at the group's third album, Microcastle, where we see the band experiment with pop hooks and accessibility while creating what I personally believe is a sneaky, under-the-radar concept album. My name is Trent Bristow, and helping me tear down the walls of this microcastle, my co-host and friend since we were little kids, Mr. David Vance. Dave, how you doing?
I can't believe it. We made it to the weird era.
We are in the weird era.
Which is strange because, like, was the last era in any way not as weird, or if not weirder?
No, it was absolutely weirder, I think, than the era we are in now. But I like that it's weird era continued. There's never really a weird era that, like, there's never a demarcation line of the weird era starts. It's just you're already in the weird era, and now we're acknowledging it.
Maybe we were always in the weird era.
Exactly.
But this one definitely does feel like we have entered a new era of Deerhunter. So
agreed.
I like the fact that it's there. It's on the album. But yeah, I'm doing good. I'm ready to get into some Microcastle. Speaking
of new eras in the band, we start with what's up with Deerhunter at this point, and we have our first lineup change since Cryptograms.
Yeah.
So Colin Mee exits the band. So what happens is Cryptograms and Fluorescent Gray both come out in January 2007. And the band heads out on a world tour that's going to take them through the rest of the year up to November-ish.
Yeah.
And by August, Colin quits the band.
Like he quits halfway through the tour?
He quits halfway through the tour, correct.
Dang.
So what happens is he actually did an interview with Pitchfork to talk about his perspective on what happened. So according to him, as he says, what happened was that initially I told them that I couldn't play a couple of shows that we had booked next weekend in Portland and Seattle because it was too much of a strain on my schedule. It wasn't necessarily my intention to quit. So essentially there was a weekend period of shows that he said, you know what, my personal life, I just can't do these shows. But they are mid-tour. They still have months left. They've been going on for months. So to the group, that's kind of like a line in the sand where they basically say, if you're not going to do these shows, then you're not in the band anymore. So that's kind of how that ends. But he also mentioned some stuff that I think is interesting to give you a little bit more information on kind of what the life was like inside the band at this time.
Yeah, like I remember you saying earlier that he was more about just playing the music and writing the music and that kind of stuff. Instead of being an outward personality.
Yeah, so he has a big interview with Pitchfork, and I'm just gonna like take some of the highlights from it. But essentially, he mentions like three main things that he says made him feel exhausted at the time. So he mentions that they had been constantly touring for almost 2 full years. So the year leading up to Cryptograms coming out, and then Cryptograms comes out, and then they go back to touring again for a full year. And he says during that time, the set list hardly changed. So he was essentially playing the same music over and over again for about 2 years. And he also mentions that the increased media attention on the group was starting to get to him. And in particular, he makes reference to a post that was on the Deerhunter blog where Bradford reviewed the poops of the members of the band. He doesn't show like photos or anything, but he does like talk about like the other members' like poop habits. At the very end of the interview, he says, I don't want to be overexposed. I don't want the world to know what our excrement looks like or what we are selling on eBay or whether we got robbed. I think it devalues the music. So I think that's a fair stance to take. And he, makes mention of several different things that were, very public about the band, like them being robbed on tour, which is now actually a very common thing to talk about. A lot of bands will start like Kickstarters and stuff when they get robbed on tour, being like, hey, we're in X city, our van got broken into, we have no equipment, like, please help us out.
Yeah, that usually really sucks.
Yeah. But I guess he was saying those things made him feel like all the little details of his life while he was on tour were being shared with everyone, and it was an amount of attention he wasn't really comfortable with.
Yeah.
So what's interesting then is he leaves the band And then without even missing a beat, they just continue on with the tour. So they play the very next date, they play the whole rest of the tour as a 4-piece, which is, I think, pretty impressive. That's a really good pivot. I know you had 3 guitarists to work with, and paring down from 3 to 2 isn't nearly as bad as paring down from 2 to 1.
Yeah.
But still, that's pretty cool that you could rework your material enough to survive without one member, without delaying your tour at all.
It also did seem like a lot of Colin's parts were more standard, just rhythm guitar parts. Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing that Bradford basically filled that role, and then Lockett filled the more lead guitarist role.
Yeah, that's right. And especially around that time, Bradford wasn't really playing guitar live. He was still, hanging out by the microphone and doing his cool thing with the star tambourine.
Yeah.
Yeah, the star tambourine was a pretty big showpiece there. So he had to, put that down and pick up a guitar kind of thing to fill in. But it's especially funny because the Pitchfork article talks about a review from a concert goer who was there, the night of the very first show as a 4-piece of this era, and they said they didn't notice anything different. They were like a big super fan, and they were like, "Yeah, no, it sounded the same as it always sounds," which is interesting and also like a bit of a slight. You don't really need to.
It's a little harsh to Colin. And I think I might have said this in an earlier episode, but like the way that Colin might have sort of faded into the background a bit makes him the most unique member of Deerhunter.
Yes, I think that's a great way to close the chapter on Colin. Is yes, he was absolutely a unique person in this whole group and in the dynamic for sure. Mm-hmm. So Colin leaves. They continue on with the rest of the tour for 2007. They finally stop in November, and then they finally are able to go back to the studio, and in April 2008, they make their triumphant return to the Rare Book Room in New York.
Yeah.
And they actually get to record with Nicholas Verhees as the producer and engineer, and they get a full week to record in studio, which is the longest amount of time they've had so far.
Yeah. And those sessions did seem pretty intense from what I saw, so.
Yeah. And so I imagine they did very well on their tour, because before, when they were recording Cryptograms, they said, we wouldn't have been able to go into the studio unless we were getting a really sweet deal on it. Yeah. This time, they're spending more time there, and they're actually getting the guy who runs it and is the engineer producer. So I'm imagining they did quite well on their world tour, and also I think Cryptograms was a bigger success than they originally thought.
Yeah, and as and they say it on the video that you showed me, like they say that Cryptograms is basically their first album. They call Cryptograms and Fluorescent Gray their first 2 albums. So yeah, it does seem like they were more riding on the success of this as the start of their whole band experience.
Yes, for sure. And the last thing I want to say on the history of this, which we're only going to touch on briefly, and then I'm going to have to put a pin in it, and we'll come back to it later, is you may, if you're ever looking up the history of this album, you might see that there's multiple release dates, and you'll be kind of confused. You're like, why is there an August release date and an October release date? What happened was the album accidentally leaked online by mistake in August of 2008. So Bradford very often, for fan engagement and stuff, on the Deerhunter blog, would put out demos, put out little covers, little fun bits that he would record, and post them for free to people to download. What happened was there was a mistake made when he was sharing one of the tracks on there, and somehow if you went to that link, you could then just go into his whole drive somewhere, and somewhere in the drive was a folder that was labeled something like Microcastle Final, whatever, and you could just go in there and be like, click, and download the entire album for free.
Hey, Cranky. So we released the album. Hey,
whoops.
Good news.
Yeah. So good news. People love it. Bad news. You're not getting any money for it. So yeah, what happened was then they had to pivot really quickly and just make it available on iTunes. on the same day. They're like, okay, you know what? Just get it up there. People can at least pay for it online. And then the physical release is still planned for October.
Oh, okay.
So it does come out on actual physical media in October later that year. And that's where we will put a pin in history for now.
Cool.
But keep that in mind that there's 2 different release dates. So the album itself. Let's talk about the music of Microcastle.
Big step.
Big step. Yeah. So like I talked about off the top, they want to be experimenting, Bradford says, but I think they're trying to be a bit more accessible. They're trying to use a lot more like pop conventions, right?
It does. Like I kind of just want to find a time period, like a pastiche that I can sort of like put this into. I feel like it kind of has similar vibes to like the pre-Beatles sort of soft rock, except heavily distorted, heavily changed, and it does feel like a lot softer. It still has that Deerhunter vibe, but yeah, poppy in like an old rock sort of way.
Yes. Dave, you're a genius, because that is exactly what the influences are on this album. So Bradford, growing up in rural Georgia kind of thing, his dad is a huge Johnny Cash fan.
Oh my God. Yes.
Right. So, and like he grew up on a lot of like late 50s, early 60s, like doo-wop music. Like think of like,
that's what I was thinking. I was thinking of like Frankie Valli sort of.
Yes, exactly like that. Yeah. Where you got like the choral backups and stuff. And like pre-Beatles rock and roll. So you were bang on with the time period of where I think like the again, I don't know how you do this, but you're a genius. Yeah, it's taking that kind of songwriting and then applying the like almost like a coat of paint of like indie rock, like shoegaze, like the atmospheric kind of rock stuff.
What I imagine is like this parallel universe where like we just skipped the Beatles. We just skipped right past the Beatles. We went straight to grunge.
Yeah.
And sort of like that sort of era in the 60s and 70s and 80s where everyone was experimenting with electronics and all that stuff just didn't happen.
Right. Yeah. And I think kind of in the same way that the Ramones basically took that same era of music and just made it punk. These guys are taking that era of music and making it like alternative indie rock, shoegazy kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's a winning formula, man. You take just classic songwriting, that works in any context, and then you find a way to make that fresh or make it palatable to an audience that wouldn't normally listen to it. I think that's a really, really good recipe for success.
Yeah. No, it has a lot of the characteristics of like that Deerhunter style. It has a lot of effects, and they're trying to experiment with sounds, but now they have more standardized chord changes, more standardized melodies, more standardized pop music things that you can sort of like point to and listen to and say, oh yeah, like that is a 2-5-1. That is a
right, yeah.
that is basic 4-chord change. Like we're getting to more established musical ideas with like a heavy filter of Deerhunter.
Yes, for sure. It's like taking those things and they're just like ushering it into like the Deerhunter like pantheon. They're like, come into our weird kind of crazy guitar world. And so the last thing I'll say about this is that combination does end up doing quite well for them. So Microcastle, in terms of sales numbers, I only have one comment that Bradford made in an interview. But in retrospect, he said that Microcastle ended up selling over 50,000 copies just in the US.
Dang.
Which is pretty good for an indie band.
For an indie band, yeah.
And it ends up peaking at 123 on the Billboard 200. So they actually do enter the Billboard charts with this album.
Dang.
Yeah,
That's
not
pretty good.
bad. Yeah. So speaking of the album as a whole, what were your first impressions of it when you pulled it up?
Like the first thing I bring up is the album, and you get the album art. This time, they actually put the name on the album cover, which is a huge step.
I didn't realize, but you're right. That is the first time they've done that.
The first time the name of the album is on the album. And I think the name of the album is important too, because I think it is part of a little meta narrative that I'll explain in a bit.
Excellent. I have similar thoughts.
So it says Microcastle. It's the lettering's huge. It's indented 3 times. The word Microcastle is so big that they have to indent it 3 times to fit on that square. That square album cover. Each letter, I believe, some of them look a little bit similar, but each letter, I believe, is a different font.
I think so. Yeah.
Which is a neat little collage, and this is a white lettering, huge white lettering, all different fonts over top of I think like a city apartment backdrop. It seems to be a city apartment. So Microcastle, the name to me, and this could be a stretch, but I think that name Microcastle and the fact that it is a collage of fonts can be like a little meta commentary on this album, or like albums in general, where it's just like a small little fortress of ideas.
Ooh, okay.
So
interesting. Not the same idea I had, but continue.
Yeah, like it's the buildings in the background could be like where they wrote their music, and like each little song is like a small little vignette. So each of them is like a different font. Each of them is a different texture that makes this entire album. So that to me is like at least just what I'm getting from the album. It's a small little fortress of ideas.
Yes. I really like that interpretation, and I hadn't thought of that. And while you were doing it, I was trying to count the letters, the number of letters in the title Microcastle, and see if it lined up with the number of tracks. And it's 1 off to my count.
Dang it!
But that would have been so perfect. But I do think there's value in what you're saying, and I do think there is absolutely the concept of a small fortress going on. Which I will then use to piggyback and share, the first parts of my conspiracy theory on what I think this album is about. If there's, somewhere inside my head, there's a detective with a corkboard and photos and string, and they're putting it all together. Because as I said off the top, I firmly believe, with no evidence from the band, that this is a concept album, and they just don't ever mention that it is.
Okay.
So in 2010, which is 2 years after this album came out, Bradford put a post up on the Deerhunter blog, and the title of the post is "The Decaying Microcastles of Detroit." And
interesting.
He's posting a link to someone had gone through Detroit in the 90s and done a photo essay on all of the homes that were built during the automotive boom when Detroit was at its peak, but then were later abandoned when the industry crashed. So there's all these, fairly well-constructed, normal-looking suburban homes that have just been left there, and they've kind of fallen into disrepair.
Yeah. And Detroit also being like a huge music city as well.
Yes, for sure. Motown.
Yeah.
So I think there's either a link where someone listened to this. Like, I'm not sure whether or not this is a chicken and egg scenario where someone listened to Microcastle and used that term in their photo essay, or if that existed beforehand. I don't know the timeline on that. I do know that when Bradford was in late high school, around the time that he was finished with a lot of his very intensive surgeries and stuff, like we talked about on Cryptograms, his parents ended up divorcing. And also, he dropped out of school around that time. So it was a pretty tumultuous time for him. And he says that he ended up spending a lot of time just at home alone and just kind of looking out at the world and isolating himself.
Yeah.
And so to me, if I take the Decaying Microcastles of Detroit photo essay and I take some of the life experiences that he's talked about, I see Microcastle as essentially, not only the physical structure of a place that you're holding yourself up in, but also you putting a distance between yourself and other people and society, and kind of like insulating yourself to avoid kind of getting hurt or avoid overexposing yourself.
This is similar to the thesis that we had, right? Where making music, making art, making albums is sort of like building a house or building a fortress.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the idea of making or arranging music, like you make a foundation, you lay a bass track, you lay a drum track, that kind of thing. You build it piece by piece.
Yeah.
So I like the album title. I like the idea of the album as being a meta commentary. And I think you're getting at the exact same thing, that this is essentially a meta commentary of music, but just from Bradford's perspective.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I think there's one song in particular I can point to that kind of ties that idea together. So yeah, on the note of talking about the music, would you like to get into it?
Cover me slowly.
Trent and Dave, listen to the song.
So, Cover Me Slowly as an intro track.
3-4 time. 3-4 time. We got there. We got there. We finally got there.
We are using different time signatures.
Yes. I've been waiting for it for so long. It's like as soon as this band starts using different time signatures, they're just going to open up to a whole bunch of ideas. But yeah, this is a very slow intro song. There's no lyrics, but all the band members are present. So Moses is laying down just a regular 3/4 beat. There's and like it's very simple root notes on the bass and that kind of thing. Very splashy drums. The guitar and Bradford are in unison doing a melody together. And yeah, it's just a very nice 4 major 7 to 1 major 7. It's a really good plagal cadence that just it's just very easy to listen to.
While we're talking about the major 7 chords, I wanted to bring up, there's a really cool sneaky guitar trick that's going on this song and on Agoraphobia as well. Because I mean, in my opinion, they're basically the same song. It's the exact same chord progression, and they lead into each other. And when they play them live, they always play them back to back. They never play one without the other. So there's a really cool guitar tuning that Lockett is using on this, because the music for these songs is credited to Lockett.
It does seem like it's being detuned. Like I had that written down. There does seem to be something going on with this. It's either lower or higher, maybe both. I don't know if there's if it's modulating.
Yeah, so there is a modulation going on, and then there's also a guitar tuning that makes the chords sound the way they do.
Nice.
So it's multiple things happening at once.
Nice.
So what he does to create that major 7 chord is he makes a regular major bar chord shape on the guitar, but the high E string, the very smallest string, he takes that and just detunes it half a step.
Ooh.
And when you do that, it moves from the root note down to the 7th.
Yeah.
And then that turns it into a major 7th.
Yeah, and it's the highest note too. So it's just putting that chord quality when you have either the highest note or the lowest note. That's what makes the chord quality really sing. So yeah.
Yes. And normally to get that high 7 is a kind of a pain to do when you're just making a chord shape. There's some tricky ways to do it, but if you're just kind of picking up the guitar and just, closing your fist and making a chord, it's kind of hard to incorporate that major 7.
Yeah.
But this tuning allows you to do it super easily, which is awesome.
That's really cool.
And originally, I thought this was a Deerhunter invention. I was like, I don't know anyone else who's ever done this tuning. And I'm like, is this the Deerhunter tuning? Like, did I discover something? And I did some research online. There is one other song I found, like in popular music that people would know that uses this same tuning.
Okay.
And it is Yellow by Coldplay.
Nice.
Which, unexpected, but I do know the guitarist of Coldplay is known for using lots of alternate tuning. So I'm not surprised that it would show up on their music. But yeah, so fun fact, this shares a tuning with Yellow by Coldplay.
Yeah, and you get that major 7 chord quality, which is what there's a lot of like 7th chords and like more built chords than just like regular triads in this album, and that's what gives me that sort of vibe of that sort of late 50s rock and roll where everyone was taken from the jazz music. Everyone was sort of like taking those ideas and just making them popular. So
yeah, you're right. There is an absolute like staple of the shoegaze genre occurring on this track.
The tremolo.
So
let's talk about the tremolo.
Well, tremolo, and I was going to say the pitch modulation that you're hearing.
Oh, okay.
Are you talking about the tremolo bar? Because the people call it the tremolo bar, even though it's more vibrato than it's tremolo, but guitarists are dumb and they named it wrong back in the day.
We're going to talk about that, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, basically what he's doing, and the number one band to look to for this technique is a band called My Bloody Valentine, which is the most popular shoegaze band out there. But basically, what you do is while you're strumming with your right hand, you also grab the tremolo bar, and every time you strum down, you also push the tremolo bar in a little bit, so your pitch is diving a little bit every single time you play the note. So that's where you get that kind of like out of tune kind of sound, but it's still in time.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's what's going on during those really big chord buildups.
Yeah,
is they're pushing that in.
So like every time he hits it and it dips down at the same time, and then he brings it back up. Yeah.
And so sorry, my fun bit of guitar trivia is also this is how you know guitarists are bad at music, is they named that the device that does that a tremolo bar.
Yep.
And tremolo modulates volume, vibrato modulates pitch, but guitarists are dumb and we got it wrong, and it's been called the tremolo bar ever since. So fun fact.
We can talk about legit tremolo that's going on with Bradford.
Yes, so it is all over his voice in the background there.
Is this Bradford's new trick?
So that is absolutely the new trick that is going on this album. Yeah. Thank you for setting me up for that. Is they're like, what's really cool? Tremolo. We're going to put that on everything.
It's pretty heavy. It's not completely damp, I guess. Sorry. It's not completely you can hear some of Bradford's original voice going through. So it's not completely wet with the tremolo effect, but it's very noticeable. It's very interesting, and like you were saying, tremolo modulates amplitude.
Yes.
Whereas vibrato modulates pitch. There are actually two different types of tremolo. Tremolo with this effect is the amplitude modulation, but a lot of orchestra players, like string players, they can't necessarily modulate amplitude like that, or it's very difficult. So another tremolo style is like repetitive, iterative note playing. So very quick note playing from violinists bowing the string very quickly, or more famously, Eddie Van Halen's Eruption solo, when he does that single note a million times in a row, that is tremolo. Yeah,
and in guitar, we call that tremolo picking.
Nice.
So we are aware of that. We're not nearly as good at it, but we're aware of it. Speaking of additional outside of regular band instruments like violins and stuff, That was a bit of a shoehorn, but go with me on this.
Hey, if there's nothing that I'm prepared to do, it's stretch.
Oh yeah, exactly. I hope you're limber today, because that was a big stretch. There's actually an additional musician on this track.
Okay.
So Nicholas Verhees is playing a synthesizer.
Nice.
That you can hear that's mimicking what Bradford's doing. And you can kind of hear, I think he's tweaking knobs and stuff as he's doing it, because the sound itself is kind of evolving as the song goes on.
So I thought that was a sustained guitar. I thought that was just like a really high sustained guitar, but it's a synth. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a little Roland synth. That's pretty cool.
And if you're saying that there's a fifth member, then I'm going to give that person a lot of credit, because there's a lot of neat touches, like really subtle neat touches on other songs in this album that I will get to.
Yes. But yeah, in particular, I wanted to shout out that little synth part, because I think it adds a really cool dynamic, because, Bradford's vocals with the heavy tremolo, and then the synth that's kind of evolving as the song goes on with the knob tweaks. That really adds, a kind of a through line for this song that is really just everyone else kind of outlining the chords of what the next song is going to be. And that really kind of keeps the energy kind of changing as it goes.
And the next song is going to be basically the same song.
It is. It's basically the same song. I look at it kind of like in a musical. They start out with like an opening song, and then later they use that same like motif or melody later on. I feel like that's kind of what they're doing here, except it's just the very next song.
Yeah. Yep. You wanna get to it?
Let's hop on over to Agoraphobia.
Agoraphobia.
Trent and Dave, listen to the song.
All right.
So speaking of new eras of the band,
yeah, this is so tasteful.
we have a lock it alert, everyone. Everyone, please remain calm, but we have a different vocalist on this song.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's neat.
So for the very first time, this is Lockett actually singing lead vocals on a song.
Nice.
However, the music and the vocals themselves are by Lockett. The lyrics are written by Bradford.
Honestly, just because the last time we were talking about Bradford's vocals, I was put in this set that like Bradford has like a deceptively good range in tone.
He does.
So I was not even aware that this was a different vocalist. I just assumed that Bradford had that ability to change his tone, because he's shown that ability to change his tone like really well.
Right.
So I kind of just assumed that it was Bradford back on the mic.
No, he had a hand in the lyrics, obviously, but this is actually Lockett singing it.
Nice.
So I don't know exactly how that exchange went down, because it was basically, the first two songs on this album were a Lockett demo that he brought into the group. And I don't know if he had the melody or if Bradford, put forward the melody, but somehow he got talked into doing the vocals for this song.
Cool.
And I think he's a cool vocalist, in my opinion. He's not a very, like, what you would picture, again, kind of like Bradford, not what you'd picture for a traditional vocalist.
Yeah.
But I think his approach, the way that he sings, he sounds very close to the mic, and he sounds almost
clean.
like, it sounds very intimate, clean and intimate. Like he said, because he's so close to you, it feels very personal. And I think that's really good in a genre that values authenticity. Like, he sounds very authentic to me. So I like that.
I have another Wikipedia definition.
Oh, hit me. What do you got?
So, agoraphobia is an anxiety disorder characterized by symptoms of anxiety in situations where the person perceives their environment to be unsafe with no easy way to escape. These situations can include open spaces, public transit, shopping centers, or simply just being outside. It is similar to claustrophobia, but sort of in a different sense of fear.
Right.
With claustrophobia, it's very tight, confined spaces. With agoraphobia, it's more like being able to see the entire landscape and knowing that you can't escape from it. Sort of like being in the middle of an ocean. and not being able to see any landmass. When I say that like Deerhunter is very good at being unsettling, everything's kind of transitioned. There's a lot of that uneasiness that has sort of left the music and instead just been really pumped into the lyrics.
Yes, for sure.
This song has some incredibly descriptive lyrics.
Yes.
And very, very comfortable and nice sounding music.
Right.
The same chord changes as the previous song, like we mentioned, but this time we're in 4/4. It's a little bit more upbeat. It's a little bit mid-tempo. The drums are a little bit less splashy.
Yeah, they're very crisp.
They're very, very,
especially the snare is it's really well done.
Clean guitars, picking guitar, which I really like.
Arpeggios for days on this.
I really like the picking style, and I'll get into that. But yeah, like this song just immediately screamed to me, okay, like this is a clean, sort of like soft rock band. This is what gave me that idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love the guitars in this. I think the guitars are really good and really good at sort of giving a counter melody or like a counter rhythm. So like, yeah, like you were saying, they're picking chord tones. And like it's a simple rhythm guitar in the right for the main section and then the picking guitar on the left side. And they're actually like opposed in the ears. And then when the B section comes along, there's a really cool counter melody that comes in the guitar that like goes, or like a major six chord that like it descends from the sixth to the fifth to the third, and it's just really nice. And then the other guitar is picking a counter melody to that.
Yes, they both start doing arpeggios together. Yeah.
So it's really cool. It's really tasteful. I like this song a lot.
Yeah. So yeah, this song is obviously one of my favorite Deerhunter songs. I don't even need to pretend. And to me, this is like the like hallmark anthem of introverts everywhere. Like for me and my people, like this is our banner that we wave as we march home alone. Because
feed me twice a day, bury me slowly.
Exactly. I think it's really cool. Bradford talks about, I've shown you the interview that they did in the studio. So I didn't want to spend too long on that. But basically, Bradford talks about this news story of a person in Germany who actually sought out the experience of being buried alive and found it enjoyable and would like hire someone to bury him to the point where he would almost die and then bring him back every time. Yeah. And like, so that, that's an abnormal thing, obviously. But I think he uses that and some of like the very obvious descriptions when we talk about, cover me and stuff like that. He uses those words literally to then take it into a more like universal experience of being introverted and wanting to be left alone.
Yeah.
But then all kind of twists it to the point of where it's very obviously detrimental to the person. But they're willing to go down that road for the sake of continuing to feel that safety. And I think the music is the safety. Is that
the music
that feeling
does
that they
such
have.
a good job. Like, this is great to me. Like, I actually love how well the music takes these really dark lyrics and turns them into something comfortable. Like this is sort of like, it's a very comfortable sounding song. It's very comfortable sounding melody. The melody is following those chord tones. There's nothing out of place or out of tune. So like that weird uneasiness is only from the lyrics, and the music makes the lyrics seem normal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which is where that uneasiness is, because it's not necessarily normal.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, well, yeah, what I was trying to say is I think what's so cool is Bradford is taking these like really out there influences and like experiences, and he takes stuff from literature and stuff too. He takes these really like strange, outside of the mainstream stories, and then finds ways, especially starting here in Microcastle, to turn them into things that if you just kind of looked at it quickly, you would interpret as something completely different.
Right.
Where you'd imply whatever your own kind of life experiences, whatever, to these things, and you can just be like, oh yeah, this is a song about just like wanting to be left alone in your room kind of thing, and you're like, yeah, you could be.
It could be.
It could be, and that's a totally valid way to look at it. But I think he's using interesting things to inform that.
Yeah. So like there's double narratives going on here, and really interesting ideas coming from the guitars. And so there's something that I love about this song that I didn't recognize the first time I listened to it. I had to listen to it a couple more times before I stopped thinking that those soft synthesizer tones in the background were placebo. I honestly thought there's a synthesizer in the background. It's very soft. It's very light. It's playing the chord tones in the background. And I thought that it was in my head for the first time I listened to it. I thought that I was just like imagining this. And then the second time it's like, oh no, that's an instrument. Someone's playing that. So I'm guessing that this is the producer, right?
Yeah. So this is Nick Verhees then, yes.
I kind of just like love how quiet and soft it is in the background. Like it's really unassuming, and it plays the chord tone, so it roots everything. It roots all of the instruments, and it sits above everything, but way off in the back. And I think it's a really nice touch. Yeah,
I think so as well. And I think the synth is integrated in such a really subtle way on a lot of these songs.
Just a good tone.
Yeah,
just a really good tone.
Just a good tone, bro. Hey, Nicholas Verhees, good tone, bro.
Yeah, no, it's sweet. I think this song pulls together really well, and in a really nice way. I like this one a lot.
Yeah. This is a high watermark for me in terms of Deerhunter's music up until this point. Before we end up just continuing on and on and on about praise for this song. Perhaps we should never stop.
Never stop the praise.
Never stop the praise. And that was, again, the shoehorn on that was pretty bad.
Oh, never stop, Trent. Never stop.
Thank you.
I don't want you to stop. I don't think we should ever stop.
Let's
go into the next song.
Trent and Dave, listen to the song.
All right.
So coming off the most ramshackle transition of all time, we are back with Never Stops.
Never stop. Never stop, Trent.
Never stop stopping. What did we think of Never Stops?
So it leads in by Bradford saying, I've had dreams that have frightened me awake.
Yes.
And the band is bringing just another positive jam.
Yeah.
just another light mid-tempo, positive sounding jam.
Yeah.
Like, I think that the band is really settling into this style of music, this like tone, this song quality, I guess.
Yeah.
Where it's just like tight drums, like tight picking guitars again, really easy melody, and then the lyrics are once again like very interesting, very involved.
Yeah.
So the band is really settling into this style of music, and so it's a 4/4 mid-tempo jam. This one is in G major, and it sort of starts in G major and goes down to the 6 minor. And that's the foundation for 8 bars. Like it'll be very light for 8 bars, and then it'll be really heavy for 8 bars.
Yeah. Yup.
And the band will lay in, and there will be more effects that go into it. There's a really interesting, they do that twice. So the lyrics go on that form twice over.
Yeah.
And then there's a really interesting instrumental bridge. Where this one is a 4-bar phrase and then a 2-bar phrase. So it's a 6-bar phrase that it's a 1 major to a 4 major to a 1 major to a 4 major, and then to a 6 minor, and then the 2 major, which is out of the key, and then it leads back to the 1.
Yeah.
It's a really nice color, and it throws you off a bit. I like it.
Yeah. And that section as well has, shout out to whoever was doing the just intense feedbacking guitar over all of that. But that's just one note, just sustaining super hard. And you can tell how loud that must have been recorded because there are, it's
wailing.
You can hear parts where the note gets taken over by the feedback, and they just left that in. They're like, no, I just want it to howl in the background. and I love that.
And once again, like it's not overbearing. It's not present. It's off in the back. So
right.
It's this really high wailing guitar. At a certain point in the song, it just keeps going for the rest of the song.
Yeah. Like once it's in,
halfway through, it just goes all the way to the end, and it's it's another one of these weird offsetting things that tilts this otherwise very positive mid-tempo jam sound.
Right.
This positive sounding song.
I think this is them finding that like chocolate in the peanut butter moment where they're like, we've hit the right recipe here of like abrasive textures and stuff, but the pop songwriting is up front now.
Yeah.
And that is working so well.
Yeah, and like every sort of technique that they've had before, they use as accents this time. So Bradford uses that dual vocal tech. That weird where he's like singing twice, but he uses it as an accent when he says it never stops. He doesn't start that way.
Yes.
He uses it halfway through the song as an accent to like really punch those lyrics.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. It's really good.
Right. Yeah. It's like saving those for like their, most effective moment to jump in.
That's what I really like. That's what I really like when in song crafting. It's just like we have this special secret move that we can do,
right?
And we just like pull it out when you least expect it.
Yes. A couple other things I wanted to say on this one. While we're on the topic of small techniques that they've used before and then reincorporate. Again, picking behind either the bridge or up at the nut on the guitar. I hear you. I hear whoever's doing that. It's great. Love it.
I
Keep
think
it
it's
up.
Bradford. I think it
might be Bradford. Yeah.
Because I believe at least when they were doing the live performance.
Yes, I think you're right.
I saw Bradford just like on that part of the guitar. So I think it's Bradford that's doing that.
I think you're right. The other thing I was going to say is coming off the back of the Fluorescent Gray EP, Bradford talked a lot about how he liked or was like, becoming more interested in writing things that were shorter and, more effective in a short period of time.
Yeah.
He said, in particular, and he uses the word micro in this, which I think is important. He says, I'm more interested in the micro structure. I want things to be a lot shorter. I don't want there to be as much long-windedness to it. And I think this song is a great example because there's just a vocal lead-in and then we're right in the verse. There's not even an intro. Why bother writing an intro? Like, let's just get to the song. And so I think that's a great example to pull of how that ethos is coming into play on this album, where we just go, start with the verse. Just go right into the verse.
It's not necessarily that the songs are shorter, because some of the songs last the same length, but the ideas are quicker in and established and then solidified. Like this song, they have those lyrics that go for 2 phrases, and then they have the bridge, and then they sort of write out the rest of the song. And that's with the Deerhunter style. That sort of matches the Deerhunter style where they'll have an idea, they'll build on it, and then they have sort of like a breakdown section that goes throughout the end of this throughout to the end of the song. But yeah, like you said, like this one really establishes its idea quickly, and it gets that solidified, and then it builds on it really well. Yeah,
it's a nice song. What I was going to say as well, speaking of establishing ideas, this song is one of the linchpins to my idea of the stealth concept album.
Ooh, I like it. I want to hear it.
In the lyrics, he says, winter in my heart. And then later says all winter and repeats that a few times. There are several different references to winter, and especially later on, frozen shit in your heart. I've talked before. I love self-referential texts like that, where you reference your own stuff. But I think as well, I truly believe there is a narrative going on in this album. The previous two songs are someone deep within their microcastle, whatever that is,
isolating.
to them. Isolating and
never feeling good about it too.
Yes, and like being content with that, even though in the back of their head somewhere they know that it's probably to their detriment. They're happy there.
Yeah,
and then to me, Never Stops is like this nagging idea of, but what else? What else is there? What else is out there, kind of thing. And I think winter in the narrator's heart in this case is them still kind of being a bit bitter to things outside of their microcastle.
Interesting.
And that, that both those nagging ideas never stop, but also the bitterness never stops. And so they're constantly in conflict.
So there's a little bit of a feedback loop going on?
Yeah.
Maybe like what happens at the end of this song?
Perhaps. I mean, I wish I could say wish I could say I was smart enough to put that together, but I like that as a supporting.
No, I think you're onto something.
Yeah.
Feed me the conspiracies.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I think that's a key part of like how this starts to develop this story. And then also I want to, put a little asterisk on winter and things in people's hearts, because I think that's going to come back into play later.
We've got 2 asterisks now.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm waiting. I'm excited.
I got a lot of stuff to say. Okay. With that, do you want to hop over to Little Kids?
Trent and Dave, listen to the song.
Reminds me of my childhood.
Just light arson and murder. I'm glad you're still here. I thought I lost you in the reverb somewhere.
Yeah, I was swimming through the haze a bit, but I've made my way back. Yeah, this one's
so Little Kids has some stuff going on.
This one's a trip for sure.
Yeah.
Once again, right into it.
Yes.
Lyrics go right into it. And another positive sounding song, but this one has a little bit more motion to the chord changes. It has that same like 4-1, the D to the A, but then it moves up and goes E to B, so it's like 2 4-1 chord changes back to back.
Got you. Yeah.
It's pretty nice, and like that phrase just puts a lot of movement to it, and they're all major triads, I believe. I did mess up once, so I could. I could be on thin ice, but that's okay. Like it's once again like picking guitars. I think like the drums are like they don't really use any of like splashy cymbals or anything else. It seems to just be either toms or bass.
Yeah, I'm not sure if during that really big build partway through the song that kind of takes us to the end, if there is a cymbal wash going on or if that's just like high passed noise going on. It's really hard to tell what is creating that.
There's a lot, and I'll get to it.
Yeah, we'll get to it. But yeah, I think for the most part you're right. It's mostly like toms and kick drum and stuff.
And like there's a guitar doing like pentatonic picking lines over the chorus. Bradford is very quiet, really quiet in this one.
Yeah.
The lyrics are almost like undercut, and it's strange because these lyrics are talking about a group of kids following a man around and then crucifying him.
Yeah, they burn him in his shed. Yes. Which is, pretty messed up. And I don't know if that, again, like I said, Bradford likes to pull from, pieces of like experimental literature and stuff. I don't know if this is from a short story or if this is, some fiction that he's created on his own. Yeah. But either way, you're right. It's quite dark in tone.
It's really dark, but like, it's crazy in the sense that it's very positive. And when all the lyrics are done in the first half of the song, And
right.
The last part of the song is when he says that they strike a match, so they initiate this action, and then it breaks into this B section, which is like triumphant.
Yes.
And
go ahead.
And rising and very like ethereal and spiritual, like a movement towards like the heavens sort of thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. To me, that's, the fire that they're lighting in the lyrics just being left to just go completely out of control and just build into something.
Yeah.
And it's a monument to whatever they're trying to accomplish by burning this person. But for sure.
I don't know exactly what the lyrics are describing, but I would say like a lot of it is very literal. Like this guy like turns on a radio, smokes a cigarette. But I will say that at least the intention feels metaphorical. It doesn't feel like this is a literal story. It feels like there is something behind these lyrics that they're trying to describe.
I agree. I have thoughts.
Which then we get into the B section, which is just a climb. It's that, once again, that plagial cadence, that 4/4, I think. Oh wait, no. This one's just a D major to an E major, which are the two
major second.
No. It's the two, because they established the tonic. They established the tonic in the chorus, which is an F sharp. So the D major and the E major are both trying to rise to the F sharp, but they never do it.
Gotcha.
They just keep those two chords going throughout the entire rest of the song, so it always feels like you're climbing. Every new chord is another step, so you're always rising. And so I will describe basically what I heard in like the sequence that I heard it. So we start with those chord changes, and the lyrics are going to get older still, and those repeat all the way throughout the end. The bass drum is now going a little bit, they're adding a little bit more notes, so it's not fully double time, but there's more hits going into it. Then there's an introduced like heavy distorted scratching.
Yes.
A weird scratching guitar, and sometimes it'll like come in like a jet plane. It'll dive down and then like fly away, sort of. It's this weird guitar scratching sound. Yeah. The guitar and bass are now in solid quarter tones. They're just jamming those chord notes a lot quicker. A little bit later, the guitar, bass, and a xylophone all match.
Yes. I picked up on the xylophone.
A melody. They introduced the xylophone in the first half of the song, but this is chorus, where like it really merges with everything. Like they make that melody over each of those chords. That and it keeps pushing. It keeps pushing all the way. Now there's more scratches. There's more like diving in and out. And then there's a really big guitar scratch that sort of like flies down and then explodes. And then everything just goes back in a little bit harder, a little bit louder, a little bit faster. Like not faster as in tempo, just faster as in like intensity. And density they hammer that until they just fade into the reverb.
And I think this is such a cool technique. Rather than having a fade out, is they have like the reverb kind of fade in and overtake everything, so that the band can fade out and just the reverb is left. That's way cooler than doing a regular fade out. There needs to be a term for that, like a reverb fade or a verb fade or something, because that's cool.
And and they just crescendo all the way through, and then melds into this ambience, and it's sweet. It's really sweet.
I agree. It's really cool. And I think it's among like the biggest they've sounded so far, because there's just so much reverb going on. It sounds so massive and grandiose. But I like that. It's not that comes out of nowhere, because very early in the song, the first guitar that you hear that's just outlining the chords is like very far mic'd. You can see, again, in the video when they're in the studio, you can see that's a pretty big live room. So I imagine they just had a mic kind of at the far end.
Yeah.
Nowhere close to the amplifier to get that like very roomy guitar sound. But I like that is always there in the song. Like that impression of space starts early and then they just let it slowly bloom until it overtakes everything.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Yeah. And then as well, since we were talking about the lyrics potentially being more metaphorical than they are literal,
right.
I've got some thoughts on it.
I can't wait.
So continuing my little narrative that I've concocted here, I think at this point the narrator is kind of looking at it and sort of like retrospectively being like, well, when I was a kid, I used to have all these adventures. I wasn't so closed off in my microcastle. I was out there doing things with other kids, and we did, we went on interesting adventures. We did cool stuff. But I think at the same time, they're, really bitter about the whole thing. And so not only is the adventure that they construct in their mind an adventure where they literally, attack an old person or, try to destroy the concept of aging to where they are now, but they also repeat to get older still. So he's like, you know what? Yeah, I guess maybe those kids were happy, but they're going to get old and they're going to be sad and bitter like me kind of thing, I think is what that all means. So yeah.
I wonder if there's like two personas that they're representing in this song, that maybe that man that they're burning is an effigy of himself.
Right. Yeah.
Sort of like a reclamation sort of thing, because it is. It sounds very triumphant.
Yes, it does. You're right.
It sounds very positive when this thing happens. When they strike the match, and then they start repeating to get older still, to get older still. It sounds very triumphant, very positive.
Okay, interesting. I like where you're going with that, because I have some thoughts, I think, on how the narrative starts to flip, how we start to have our actual like first action in the hero's journey kind of thing in the next song. So maybe I need to adjust my my range a little bit and say maybe it starts here with the match, and that's our big inciting incident. Is
this crossing the threshold?
Yes, you know so much more about the hero's journey than me. You can actually put the labels on it. You can help me out with that.
All right.
But I think that's it. So let's pop over to Microcastle then.
Hell yeah.
Trent and Dave, listen to the song.
All right. So Microcastle, you want to talk about dynamics?
Yeah. So there's I guess it's 2.5 minutes of an entire rubato section.
Yeah.
So it's just Bradford at whatever tempo, like he's setting the pace.
It reminds me of Spring Hall Convert that way. Where he's exactly setting when each line starts, and everyone else is just kind of naturally following that.
Jazzers love a good rubato section. So this is rubatos are basically just that. The performer sets the pace instead of either the band leader or the conductor.
Gotcha.
And they basically pull and stretch, and you can see that a lot in Bradford's guitar playing. It's like they are just milking these chord tones. Massive tremolo on the vocals.
You bet.
And yeah, it's just a really nice chord change. You get that, like, for the beginning of the song, it's a lot of just the 2 minor to the 5 major.
Yeah.
So it's really setting up that desire to resolve to the 1.
Right.
The 2-5-1 is a really strong musical cadence. And it teases resolution for several bars.
Right.
Yeah, and then it finally gets there. And the main section is a 1-3-4-5.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so like a 1 major, a 3 minor, 4 major, 5 major, and then it wants to resolve back to the 1.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting in this section when he's going sort of like 4 to the 4 and then back to the 5, and then he'll like strum a major triad down in semitones.
Yes, yeah, he does a little descent
back
into
to
it.
the 4. And it's really tasteful. It's really tasteful. It sounds really good. I just like the way that once again it's like this slow ballad, late 50s rock ballad sort of almost like a slow prom night sort of thing. But washed in that Deerhunter filter, just drenched in that like alternate indie grunge.
And I really like the start of this song as a bridge over from Little Kids from the previous song, because I think obviously it ended in such a massive big way.
Yeah.
Little Kids, where there was so much going on, and the reverb sound is so huge. And then we come down to something smaller. There's still a ton of reverb and stuff going on, because I think if you had none, it would feel a bit too harsh. You would feel like you moved somewhere too fast, but they're very sparse in the instrumentation.
Yes. That's it. That's where the dynamics are.
Right. That's what I was going to say.
Yes. Ugh. I love that.
So you find a way to kind of make that bridge between the two of them in terms of the sonics, but then in terms of what you're playing, you find a way to strip it back. And now we're at, this is the least amount of instrumentation that's been going on so far in the album.
Very
so
soft.
You have a very big high point and a very big low point right beside each other, which makes them both feel so much
bigger. They feel bigger in context.
Yeah.
Yes. It's very
that's some
soft.
really smart production planning. Yeah.
It's very introspective. I like how this section sounds a lot, and he gets to just like express himself for 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's really good. Like they set up the entire chord change of the song. Like they set up the full section. Like I said, it's that that tension for a section, that 2 minor to 5 major tension, and then there's a major section, there's a main section, that 1 3 4 5 that I was talking about, and then it goes back.
Yeah.
Then the band kicks in, and they carry out the song.
Right, and now it's an indie rock song.
Yeah.
A couple things I wanted to point out, because I have, I always like to give shout outs to production stuff that I find. There's a really cool, just like soft, like coos from Bradford in the background you can hear during the quiet section.
Yep.
Those are really tasteful. Those are really nice. I wanted to give those a little shout out. The other thing I wanted to say is that the lyrics in this are kind of sparse, but I think I've figured out, and again, in terms of my interpretation, my conspiracy theory of what I think this album is.
I want to hear it. I
think I've got it. So the narrator is struggling about whether or not to go to sleep. They start in the very beginning saying, try not to go to bed. Because, in my opinion, they're in this microcastle, and going to bed means you're just going to start the next day exactly where you began this one, and they're kind of stuck in that loop. And so they're basically keeping themselves awake to the point of like tiring themselves out. They sound so is laconic the right word? Just tired and drawn out?
I'm not
at the beginning of this?
I'm not sure, but
I don't know if that's the right word, but basically they sound lethargic is one word I do know the meaning of. So that to me suggests, first of all, how they like it's played early in the song. And towards the end of the song, they come to the realization that, okay, eventually I'm going to have to go to sleep. I can't fight it forever.
Yeah.
But when I do, what if instead of the repetition of what I've been doing, I go to sleep and I wake up tomorrow and it's a beginning. It's something different.
Yes.
I make the conscious decision now that when I wake up, things will be different.
Once again, like a really triumphant transition.
Yeah.
Except
and that's where the
lyrics are very ominous. They're very like, and this part is really introspective because it is just Bradford for the most part, just on a guitar and just on vocals. So yeah, it does once again have this really triumphant transition when the band comes in, and like you can hear the song in its entirety in like an up tempo 4/4, hearing those chord changes in one context and then hearing them transformed into this very up-tempo context has that sort of transition, has that sort of awakening.
So yeah, to me, it's like that's the point where the decision is made for the narrator, and now they're determined to go out and do it. And so then you hear the whole band come in. And it's, you know, it's the same thoughts in a different context. And it's also cool because they've hinted at that before with "Cover Me Slowly" and "Agoraphobia." They did the same thing where they use the same chords in two different ways. So that's really cool as well. But to me, like this marks like the transition point between being stuck in the Microcastle and maybe branching out from the Microcastle a little bit.
Interesting. I can't wait to hear about it.
Yes, we'll have to save that for next time.
Next time, we'll be coming back with our part 2 of Microcastle. Until then, have a wonderful day.
Bye.